Folks, this right here is Finland, a beautiful country with as many lakes as Germany has beer bottles, with amazing memes and of course people that would like to remain distant from one another. Today in this video we're going to check out Finland in a Victoria 3 save sent to me by Patryk. Patryk, surprisingly, actually did most of what he did correct in this playthrough. And yet his economy plummeted and he is looking at basically bankruptcy. Today we're going to be turning this around and we're going to highlight a couple of things, both in the economy and warfare. Some of these things will be bugs that I want you to be on the lookout for in case you are ever in this situation, and some of those are basically misread numbers. We're going to take a look at that as we go. As we always do it, we of course have to first understand who we are and where we can go with this. First of all, our numbers here don't look all too good. What is very noticeable for me here is that our diplomatic pact with Russia signifies us to be a puppet. Patryk did tell me that Russia attempted to puppet him, nobody assisted Finland, and with that he just became a puppet. This is very dire, because as a puppet you give 20% of your treasury revenue to your overlord. In this case, meaning that we are missing out on 40,000. Now, something that is quite peculiar is the fact that Russia is in the Ottoman market right here. It's honestly pretty funny to see. I've never seen this before. Patryk told me that supposedly they had a civil war, which isn't too surprising. This save game was created on 1.0.5, aka everybody constantly has rebellions, and I assume that the Ottomans demanded an obligation from the Russians to aid them in that civil war, leading to them then being pressed into the Union here. This leaves us in a very interesting and odd position. I don't know really what to make of this. I think this market is much bigger, but I don't think the structure changes. Let's say, for example, Germany's market was the one that Russia and us are in. Germany is a very developed economy, making it so that we would have to compete with their output. On the other hand, the Ottomans don't really change the balance of things. They're, fairly rural, they don't really have an industry. I think this is basically just Russia and Russia meeting up and forming a bigger market. It's not something that we should be too concerned by. But obviously, we want out, because we will want our independence sooner rather than later. Now, let's just take a quick look at Asia. Yep, okay, yep, oh, alright, yeah, okay, and now let's never look at Asia again. Something that we definitely have to take a look at, on the other hand, is Patagonia right here. These are colonies that Finland has taken and is still taking, as you can see, and this was a very smart move. Patryk basically saw that on the Ottoman / Russian market, I suppose, there was basically nobody producing coal. You can see it right here, Diyarbakir and southern Serbia. It really does look like Russia is literally not producing any coal right now, which is just a complete disaster. But we are importing a lot via trade routes, which we can downsize if we are in a position where, of course, we're producing our own. That is exactly what he wanted to do here. I have to tell you, you should do this much more often. You should, for example, also have colonies in Africa. But if you're too late for that game, obviously you need to take what you can. And Patagonia appeared to be free, so this was a smart move indeed. Commonly, when I do these videos, we have to spend a lot of time in the politics screen, because commonly this is the root of the issue. In this playthrough, that is not the case, however. The laws that Patryk has chosen are generally really good. If you do a playthrough that is democratic, that is multicultural, then you should definitely go with guaranteed liberties. Very smart move here. And on the other hand, we got protected speech, we got workers' protections, but also have protectionism, positioning us quite well. Please do take note that we also have proportional taxation. This makes it so that most of the tax burden, very important, will actually be with rich folks, so with the upper strata that owns ownership shares in buildings. This means that if you have high taxes, you won't actually make the majority of your population mad. That aside, this looks pretty decent. The only thing that I think should be highlighted here is that you really want to go harder on the home affairs. If you have guaranteed liberties and you are going to go through a bunch of issues with not just your economy, but your population as well, then have this as high as possible so that you can get, basically more loyalists and fewer radicals. So now you might say, okay, wait a minute, then what is the actual issue? We're looking at politics, everything looks fine. If we look at these buildings right here, you can see that they largely have massive cash reserves, making it so that they seem to be doing quite fine. Why are we losing this much money? The answer to this is sort of twofold, and one is a bug and one is suboptimal play. This budget screen right here is something that I absolutely love, because we're looking at a screen where when I'm done with the explanation, you will say, wait a minute, this guy said the exact opposite in previous disaster save videos. What the hell is going on in here? And the answer to this is that it depends. This is something you will always find in economics, and today we're going to be exploring something that, indeed, in other circumstances, is the exact wrong thing to do, but but in this circumstance is the exact right thing. Let's take a quick look at this. We are a democracy, meaning we have very little authority. This means we can only have one consumption tax. Now this consumption tax is set on luxury furniture. You can see that it is quite decent in terms of how much money it brings in, and it only targets the upper class, which is of course good as well. Then down here, the government wages and the military wages are set to normal. In general, very smart move, because again, if you take away money from these people, you make it so that they can't buy as much and your economy might suffer. Then right here, we have a taxation level of very, very low. I mentioned this earlier, but we have proportional taxation. Proportional taxation makes it so that the tax burden will largely fall to the people that are a part of the upper strata. You can see it right here as well, that the tax burden actually becomes lower as we go towards the lower strata. Here just 12.3% and up here 14.8%. Now the reality of this is that in previous videos I said very much explicitly and purposely that if you set your tax burden to very high in an economic crisis, you will completely decimate the potential of purchasing power of your population, potentially sinking your entire economy even more. In this scenario right here, it is actually the advisable thing to do to raise taxes and put them to very high. This is something that you can do under these particular circumstances for one very good reason. We have proportional taxation in a massive, massive market. So, what does that mean? If we look at our economy, you can see that, for example, all of these buildings right here, as well as most of the buildings right here, are doing incredibly, incredibly well. If we look at the furniture market right here, for example, what we can very easily see is that there is a massive, massive demand for this, and this is very, very important. We aren't just selling these goods in Finland. If we were, then we would also require the consumption base to actually buy them. But that's not what's happening here, right? Because we have the Ottomans and we have Russia inside of this massive market. Meaning, even if I squeeze my own population, at least for a bit, our buildings will still be able to manufacture well enough. And this is a massively important thing to realize. Sure, proportional taxation makes everybody poorer, but primarily it makes the richer poorer, and it puts us finally into the positive. But the important part here is that our buildings, our actual economy, will not be impacted much by it because there is still a consumption base in the market that isn't taxed just as heavily, for example, in Russia and in the Ottoman Empire. Alright, so I have unpaused just so that we can observe the changes right here. You can clearly see our graphs are crazy, but we are finally in the positive. As we make more revenue, our diplomatic pact cost obviously also goes up, since we have to give 20% to Russia. This cost is one that needs to go. But being positive means that coming in the next week, we can actually start to build again, which is excellent because we won't be doing it with our own money. We will be doing it with this investment pool money right here. Currently, this money isn't going anywhere, and we want it to be going somewhere. Now, the other thing that needs to be highlighted is that we sort of want to work through all of this to really understand whether the buildings that we're building are good and necessary or whether they aren't. I think in general, I can tell you that we want to set up our construction sector much, much more. This can go higher, and it should. This is at least for starters, right? Now, the important part here is that you don't want to maintain this budget, even if it right now seems to be working for long. Sure, we are deep, deep in benefits now, or high up in benefits, I should say, but yeah, we are also literally destroying our upper strata. They are now up to 34.7% in taxation because of the massive budget dividend taxes right here. This is something that we can do for some time. We're going to pick up some radicals, but in general, we should be picking up some loyalists as we build more buildings and make sure that, you know, we leave all of these unemployed folks and these peasants here behind, actually getting them to work and being wealthy together with us. This means that we now need to be very aggressive about expanding and getting our construction economy and our general economy to be kickstarted again. The other side of the coin, though, is that sure, we can optimize our actual economy here, we can do something about it, but there's a bug at work here. Maybe some bug that you have never seen. Jesus, what the hell is going on over here? Maybe this is a bug that you have never seen before, but it is something that I want to highlight so that if you are in this situation, you can find it yourself. We are currently at merely 34 bureaucracy, despite creating 1.72k bureaucracy every damn week. This is of course something that happens as well because we have a skyscraper which again amplifies the effect of bureaucracy. Most of our bureaucracy is spent on this, trade routes. But these trade routes are not in our market, they are in the Austrian market and they are actively running. I don't know how exactly this happened, I'll tell you this outright. We know that the Russians are in the Ottoman market. My assumption is that maybe at some point they were in the Austrian market, and when Patryk created the trade routes for the Austrian market, as his overlord was in the market, the trade routes didn't move after the overlord moved into a different market. That is at the very least my guess, but it is a bug that you need to be aware of, because right now we're spending all of these trade routes, all of this bureaucracy on literally nothing. Sure, we are in a position where then these trade centers may make a profit, they may be in a good situation, but we're not collecting tariffs and we aren't doing anything in our actual market. This is completely wasted. So if you are in this position where, you know, you are a member or you're a member in a market because of your overlord, make sure that you then check if a market change occurs that, well, this doesn't happen to you. This is an absolute disaster. I honestly don't quite know what happened here, but yeah, I'm going to correct this. I'm going to cancel all of these routes and we can go from there. Alright, now that we have cancelled all of these trade routes that made basically no sense, we are now in a situation where we have 874 bureaucracy. On top of that, we are now going to go even further on the home affairs issue. In general, it would be great to have a higher health system level, for example, or even, for example, education. But right now, I care more for people to be less unhappy and more happy. Outside of that, we can also, of course, use this bureaucracy to actually facilitate trade that aids us. Now, there are two approaches if you are a small member of a market that you can take to make things work. When we take a look at this, we can see that, for example, wood is overproduced in the market that we are in. This obviously makes perfect sense, right? I mean, we are in Russia, you can see we're producing quite a lot. We are, in all fairness, also consuming quite a lot, in particular here in southern Finland. But in general, this is a Russian thing. If we trade the wood through our trade centers, we will benefit from it. So we will collect the trade revenue. It's a very smart move that you should do, and I will even do it right now, right? There's nothing really that gives us any pain. I'm going to export this. We're going to look for the high productivity trade routes, and that is all fine and dandy. But as a smaller nation in a big market, what you want to do is check your own particular industries. For example, these arms industries right now are making a loss, and yet they aren't really showing up here. Don't worry about this too much. What you want is favor your very own economy. In this case, if we start exporting these military goods, we are essentially creating a better situation for our very own economy. Because when everything works here, the arms industries will then be profitable again, and we don't even have to subsidize them. Making this, you know, something that brings us trade revenue, tariffs, and of course actual income in the buildings themselves. You want to check what part of your economy isn't working and then favor that when creating export and import routes. Right here, what we're doing is just a massive push towards strengthening our own economy. Whether Russia has this same production or not doesn't really matter to us. But as I said though, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't just export things that, you know, are just very common on the market. It can indeed be incredibly beneficial. And this right here is a big part of this. We are in a situation where we can export a whole bunch of stuff and then say, you know what, but I'm going to make it easier on us here by importing some luxury goods that we otherwise wouldn't have, so that we are taxing people very highly, but then are also giving them goods at a much cheaper rate. This creates wealth, and this will also strengthen our population. Alright, now that we have created a bunch of trade routes, they will slowly but surely start working, we will make money off of them, and our income will look quite good. As long as we are in a position where we aren't building too fast, our investment pool will also either maintain itself or at the very least be pretty close to it. Other than that, currently, we just want to be concerned about actually leaving the Russian market. For that, we need to be less than cordial. We need to be at a plus 20 or less, so we have to damage the relations. Patryk was already doing that, and then we will declare war. Why I know that we will win this, and why we will win this, I will explain as soon as we declare it. Right, and we now do have a free slot for research. Since this was, of course, a playthrough that was meant to get Perkeletankki, we will rush mobile armor. First we get military aviation, and then go down there. Now, as soon as you leave the situation of being bankrupt, you can re-enable this, and it will mostly, if not entirely, there you go, be carried by the investment pool. This makes it so that we are now stimulating the economy by using the actual goods, and we are finally using the investment pool itself while still actually earning for it. I don't know whether we can maintain this, but hey, you gotta take it as long as you can, right? Yeah, and here you can see it. The upper strata is doing better and better, as of course they should. We are a very prosperous nation, and our trade centers here that basically made no money, as we were looking at a situation where they were working in the Austrian market somehow, are now back to making money as well, making our upper strata even wealthier, and in turn, you guessed it, making us wealthier. The further you are from the debt ceiling here, I'm gonna basically say it at the halfway point, I'm going to put down our taxes, further relaxing the economy and giving the upper strata more purchasing power. Oh, and isn't that interesting? The Sikh Empire having a bit of a war going on here. It is Russia challenging them. They want to puppet the Sikh Empire. And it is going to be a major war, it seems. We have Austria, Sindh, Kalat, Kokand, and Afghanistan. And this is good for our arms economy. I mean, my god, yeah, everybody will be buying so many arms. Look at that. Absolutely gorgeous. While on the other hand, of course, just being a bit disastrous for Russia, I guess. The Austrians fought valiantly, but in the end, radical Austria rose up. And yeah, that's not gonna... This war is going to end quite soon, I think. It's a bit of a stalemate. Oh no, the Russians actually have to pay war reparations. Yeah, wow, the Sikh Empire defeats Russia. Classic move right here. Now, this means that we are now coming up to actually our chance to defeat them. The only thing that I want to build outside of course, you know, having more explosives and so on, is everything related to barracks. I will explain why exactly we're placing these in southern Finland as soon as the war starts, but basically, we're going to build 20 levels of barracks here in Finland, despite only having one general that can only command 20 units. Alright, it is 1899, and I'm of the opinion that we can become immediately independent. Frankly, we could have done this earlier if, you know, this war with Russia and Austria hadn't taken place. But that aside, it doesn't really matter. There are some things that we should go over when it comes to becoming independent, because I think most people approach it from the wrong angle. Patryk, for example, I am convinced could have gone independent probably 2 decades ago, maybe even earlier, instead of committing to be a puppet for Russia. So, first and foremost, when a new player looks at this, they have to identify 2 things. A, can I defeat them militarily? And B, where's my market going to be after I am independent? Now, militarily, it looks as though we are definitely weaker. I mean, look at it. 29 battalions plus 52 conscript battalions and an army projection of just 338. Embarrassing, am I right? Russia, on the other hand, has 299 regular battalions and 402 conscript battalions for a proud army power projection of 1846. They will get shredded by us. There are certain things that we can consider right now and certain things that I will explain as soon as we are in battle. But for the moment, you have to realize that with this GDP that is quite literally just a little bit less than ours right now, don't worry about it. They couldn't maintain all of these battalions mobilized even if they wanted to. More importantly, of course, you should always make sure not to care about the army projection number, but instead check the production methods. We are on trench warfare, shrapnel artillery, and on field hospitals. They, on the other hand, are, yep, you guessed it, line infantry, mobile artillery, and sure, fair enough, field hospitals, but yeah, these are terrible, in particular for 1899. Just gonna challenge them, and Russia will fold. At least that is my assessment. Now, when it comes to the market itself, this is a bit more difficult because the UI really doesn't support it. In general, obviously, we have certain industries in Finland that we care about and that need resources that we might not even have. Do we have enough iron? I doubt it. When we take a look at the good, we can see that we're producing 872 and we're using 1,551 here. Yeah, actually, we are producing roughly enough, but I hope you know where I'm coming from here. So what is the situation? Do I have to go through every single good itself and then check whether we have enough? The answer is yes. If you're in a position, for example, early Bavaria, you are really not capable of trading with anybody after you're independent, except with Germany and Austria, maybe even cutting off Rhineland itself. This makes it so that yes, at that point you need to check whether you in Franconia and in Bavaria are producing and consuming enough to get a relatively stable market afterwards. If you're in a position like Finland, you really don't have to care. For lead, for example, we can trade for it. For iron, steel, fertilizer, for anything, for example, like silk, groceries, and so on, you can just trade for it. Don't be afraid of going independent if you have a lot of ports and if your convoys, and you can see it right here, we produce plus 12,000 convoys that are currently given to Russia itself. If you have enough of these convoys, don't be worried about your market balance. If you can't trade with anybody after you go independent, you need to be fairly balanced right away. Otherwise, hey, just let your market be created, crash a bit, create trade routes, and you will be fine in a few weeks. So, this is not something that I worry too much about. So, with that being said, I am convinced we're stronger than Russia because we have better PMs. What exactly that looks like we're going to see in a second. For the moment, we will just declare independence, because even if we go independent and our market is trash, we can just trade for things. I'm not too concerned by that. Let's do it. Now, something of note here is that most people just order their troops immediately to the front line. Don't do that. You can see it right here. As we are on standby, we take 0% attrition per week. If I actually sent them to the front line, we would begin taking, and I think we need to let it tick here, we would start taking 20% per week. There it is, 20%. We don't want that. I will not send them to the front line until, you know, roughly before the war starts. And there we go. War has broken out. We're facing the Japanese shogunate. We are facing Moldavia. We're facing the Ottomans and, of course, Russia. And, you know, this front line doesn't really look all too good, right? Yeah, sure, our values are higher, but they have many, many more people at this front line. Oleg Rostopchin right now is attacking. They seem to feel confident, and the game is quite literally telling us that the Russians should be confident. Let's find out whether they really should be confident, because I gotta tell you, they shouldn't be. Alright, now you see this and you think to yourself, oh my god, 34 units against 18. The AI, it sucks so much. What is happening here? Why is this battle so unfair? I'm telling you right now, no sweat, this is an easy, easy victory. Let's take a look at a couple of stats that the game doesn't show you that you should really be considering, because otherwise you will basically be missing half of the game. When we take a look at these troops right here, we're looking at, you know, troops that are present, of course, from southern Finland. These troops have even more troops in the backup here, in the reserve. You can see them right here. Why is this good? What does it mean? Well, first of all, as we are in the battle, our production method makes it so that many more people will be wounded rather than dead. This is good, because the wounded might actually become soldiers after this is over, rather than just, you know, being dead. They might also become dependents, but don't really think about that too much. It is good to have as many people recover as possible. This is determined by our recovery rate. You can see our recovery rate is a little bit higher than the one of the Russians, because the Russians don't have an amazing commander, which we do. But there is also something here that isn't even present in this overview, but is incredibly important. And you're going to be seeing this in this very bar right here. In this graph that, you know, looks very bad for the Russians. As I said, it never even was a challenge, whereas we are a straight line. What is actually going on here? We have now been fighting for weeks. And yet, every one of our mobilized troops that is fighting here is basically full. Sure, not entirely, but basically. Why is this happening? This is happening, A, because of the recovery rate, and B, because we have troops here in reserve. The way barracks recruit and the way barracks refresh their troops is done via the training rate. This barrack can train 1,200 manpower, so 1,200 units, or people I mean, per week. Now, the magic here is that we don't have our full troops out. What I mean is that this is generated per level of our barracks. We have 30 levels, but we're only utilizing 20. If these barracks only had 20 levels, we would only train 800 troops per week. Right now we're training 1,200, but everybody here in reserve isn't taking any damage, they're not facing any attrition, and with that, are actually just generating a higher training rate that will keep our actual refreshment rate, meaning our battle capabilities here, very, very stable. I mean, this is almost a straight line right now. If we, on the other hand, check out the Russians, you will notice the following. This is a 17-level barrack. All 17 levels of these barracks are actually present at this front line, meaning all of them are taking attrition, meaning all of them are eating up the training rate. And their training rate, of course, on top of this is even lower, because it is determined by the primary production method. We have trench infantry, every level gives 40, every level here just gives 20, meaning they are, by default, producing more soldiers at a much, much lower rate, and they are producing it for all of their troops because they are all mobilized, and with that taking attrition at the front line. You can see Oleg Rostopchin and Andrei Frolov are both present at this front line, whereas we have units that are literally just sitting there, basically training more units. This is a very, very important thing to understand. Yes, the offense and the defense value matter a lot. But the more you can keep people in the fight via the recovery rate, and the more you can bring more people in via the actual manpower training rate, the better your fighting will be. I could have even just 10 units here and we would still win against this overwhelming force. Don't worry about it. And now that this battle is over, I think the numbers speak for themselves. You can see our recovery rate has basically done everything for us, and then whenever we did face our troops maybe losing a couple, yeah, they were facing everything much, much worse. And every man that Russia loses is worse for them, because their training rate, of course, is much, much lower. We lose fewer men and our training rate is higher. This is an absolute train wreck for Russia, and yet they keep attacking because, well, much like the player that is inexperienced here would think, they think that they have an advantage. Trust me, Russia does not have an advantage. They are literally running their troops into a meat grinder. And for every damage that we take, we immediately get refreshed because our recovery rate and our manpower training rate is just that high. There is much more to combat than what you initially see, and this is a big part of it. Building barracks in one state and then only using a part of those barracks troops in the actual combat makes it so that you can recover in a much nicer fashion. We are quite literally invincible. Now don't get me wrong here, the defense number, the offense number, of course they also play a big role. Did this guy just put a head on? They also play a big role, but that isn't the most important part of this battle. The most important part is indeed that we die much less, we recover much quicker, and we kill at a much higher rate. That's basically it. Alright, so now that we're nearing the end of this war, you can see it right here, they almost accept this peace deal with our independence. Let's just quickly examine the front line. We just had a bunch of very costly battles, I mean, as it is right here, look at this, 68 of their battalions, and yet they lost. Obviously a difficult fight, but a fight that we won. And if we examine our troops, you can see that we are still, you know, we're looking at some 1,000, some 947, 731. Our manpower in these battalions is looking pretty good. What about the Russians? What about the Ottomans? 149, 290, 495. Truly terrible. Look at these Russians here as well. This one has 80 troops in one battalion out of 1,000 possible. And I mean, the Ottomans, of course, are also in a truly terrible spot. Yes, there are many more people, but we are just so much better at the logistics here that they never even stood a chance. And with that, I mean, you know, it's just that simple sometimes. Independence has come our way and the war's over. It's just that easy. Ah, look at that. We win a war against Russia and immediately the Finnish people say, hey, I want prohibition. That is quite funny. You know what, I'm going to say, nah, I'm Bavarian, sorry, we can't do that. And the more important part here, as I said, you will of course panic immediately after. You will say, oh my god, where's my money, what is happening? We simply now need to take a look at everything that has a shortage, just start importing, and that is it. We have the ability to trade, and we should utilize it whenever we can. In this case, look at that, this is a nice profit that we can make here, and of course, it is something that will kickstart our economy yet again. This number shouldn't be too frightening. Obviously, initially it will be, but as you go around, just start picking off the buildings that need more resources and start getting them via trade routes. That's all you need to do. Man, and it does look, of course, very depressing to go from 70 million GDP to 49 million, but don't worry, it will recover. So as I said, if you are a nation that is capable of importing and exporting quite freely, like with this massive supply network, don't worry about it once you go independent. Sure, your economy looks like it crashed, but all you need to do is click on this, Finnish market, import a bunch. I've already done that right here. And then click on this and Finnish market, export a bunch. With this technique, you will be capable of keeping your economy running. You import what you need for the buildings and you export what you can't sell at home. Ultimately making it so that everybody will be making a lot of money and you collect the tariffs on top. Very nice. Now, there is a really weird bug here. I don't know what causes it, but basically, after we become independent, this part of Finland, so our colonies, actually remain without market access. You can see that we would have the potential when it comes to convoys, but we just don't connect down there. I will reload, and I think this will fix it. Yep, and would you look at that, Finnish market access has been restored after the reload. Not entirely sure what caused that, but hey, be that as it may, we now are in contact again with the location in our country that actually produces the coal. And now that we have returned the glory of our market to the highest GDP per capita, of course, and our GDP has almost recovered to where it was beforehand after I started trading and so on, you can actually see this here. We are incredibly active when it comes to trading now. We're looking at a situation where obviously we need to fight future bottlenecks of our economy if we really want to build all these tanks for Perkeletankki. For this purpose, I'm getting some rubber here from Indonesia. We're colonizing it, and I'm probably going to grab a whole bunch of this island right here. And after that, we have to maybe look for some oil, but surely we can find it somewhere, be that a whaling station or be that a situation of an actual oil field. Either way, we are in a great position without ever blobbing when it comes to actual Europe. We didn't take anything from Russia, although we could have, and we have such a tiny population, and yet have this sort of GDP. Isn't this gorgeous? This is what electricity can do for you at this point in the game. We've built it up. We're using our coal for this now as well. So this is really directly going into that. We have become a great power. And our GDP has long eclipsed where we were before we left Russia. This is something that you can do very quickly after you become independent if you are able to trade for everything that you need, which of course we are. If we go even further, you can see, sure, we got a bunch of shortages, but that is just because we have now become so incredibly wealthy that all of a sudden people actually buy art. What's up with that, right? Now, Kutai just gave in. That's perfectly fine by me. And all of a sudden, we are actually in possession of the rubber. We just need to hire a bunch of people here. I reckon that we might actually have to destroy a few buildings here. I think I would best get rid of the things that we really can just import, right? Because rubber right now is something that the world just fundamentally underproduces, and by freeing up some work slots here, we can actually put it into our market. This will boost our economy significantly as well, of course, as it actually brings us into a really good production situation. God, I really love looking at the GDP curves every time you bring something in like electricity, rubber, or oil. Just look at how it is popping off. We're number 6 worldwide now. I think we can probably make it to at least 4 or 3. I don't want to gamble on 1 or 2, but yeah, I think we're looking pretty good. Now, the only thing that I really need to make this happen is oil, and the best oil source in this case is, I think, Venezuela. If we take this location right here, that is 38 levels of oil rigs. I think we can make that happen, right? It's not enough people living there, which is quite troublesome, but maybe we can make people actually move there, right? We'll have to see either way. You know what? Why don't we just go ahead with conquer the state of Zulia? Oh my god, they actually just surrendered it to me. It is so funny. They were looking at the trench infantry. They were looking at this right here. The extremely modern flotillas. They're like, you know what? Why don't you take that? We don't even know how oil works in the first place, okay, buddy? So we're gonna definitely get rid of literally everything they have here because we don't need any of it. Not even any of these right here. And then we're just going to start building ports, the most modern ones, of course. And with that, should be in a position of building proper oil rigs. Oh, wow. Will you look at that? We actually have already reached it. Produce at least 100 units of tanks per week. We're producing 109. Literally not a problem at all. Our GDP is up to 106 million, and we are 5th on this ranking. Huh. Damn. Look at the difference in standard of living. Finland is doing all right, I think. And you know what? I'm actually going to call it, well, fairly close to here, I should say. We are still doing stuff. We're still expanding our GDP like crazy, and we definitely can catch up here, I think. But I have something much more interesting in mind. Why don't we just reverse these things, huh? Russia, I think you should be our puppet. We have ascended and are literally just a straight line now. That's what happens if you have tanks, if you have amazing recovery rate, and they basically have nothing. Now, it has to be said as well that this is a move that I wouldn't, that I would not recommend. Everybody is very angry at us now, but hey, it is what it is, okay? Well, and would you look at that? This is it. We can call this war. Was this a very smart war? No. Never do what I just did. But I hope that you understand the power of being technologically and economically superior to your enemies. I actually think this might not even have been all that stupid. I think we can bounce back from this just because of the Russian diplomatic pact. Now again, I do want to stress, never do what I just did there. It creates this sort of a world overview, and you definitely don't want that. But either way, the tables have turned. Finland has taken over Russia. And I hope that you now understand what to do and how to know whether you are stronger than somebody and whether you can defeat them both economically and militarily. Finland is out, and I'll see you later, alligator.